For roughly the last 5 years, the zombies community has been in a precarious place with the mode. Maps, main quests, and aspects of the gameplay had almost been flipped upside down, going from what was once rich with style, challenge, and mystery to what modern developers would call a more accessible approach.
No more starting with a pistol.
Of course, when looking in the rearview mirror at what many would consider classic zombies, things were still never perfect. But after the catastrophic ending of Black Ops 4 Season, a renovation of the franchise was needed, which then gave birth to Black Ops Cold War. But introducing major overhauls is never so simple, and this developmental undertaking sent shockwaves through the community, causing distrust towards the developers, as the mode we all love so much seemed to be confused. It has been quite interesting to watch as Treyarch made many attempts to refine this formula over the last 5 years, but what is clear now is that the Zombies development team have finally landed on solid ground with Black Ops 6's debut Zombies map. And while there is a lot to love about this brand new and shiny experience, there are of course still flaws present. But despite these various blemishes that appear from time to time, what is absolutely certain is that Treyarch has a clear and uninhibited direction for the first time in years, and that all starts here with Terminus. Leading up to the launch of Terminus, players had received teasers, trailers, and blog posts showcasing the surface-level information of what to expect. And while there will always be those who raise their voices in dissent, it appeared that the majority of Zombies fans were pleased with the stylistic choices Treyarch was bringing to the table. Perhaps some of this excitement could be chalked up to the COD cycle, but I think it's safe to say that things have felt different this time around, as Treyarch really seems to be listening to feedback and taking fan criticisms to heart. And while there have been many steps taken along the way to get to where we are now, Treyarch have been very keen on messaging to fans that they wanted to bring back more style to their art direction, increase the difficulty of the mode, add more variety to the gameplay, and lastly, knock it out of the park with the Zombies narrative. And for the most part, the devs are holding true to their word. The setting of a Zombies experience is honestly one of the most important pieces to get right, almost as important as the core gameplay itself. And for good reason, as without a fun and creative space for the devs to dream of and create for players, all of the other aspects of a Zombies map that we have come to expect to enjoy lose some of that anticipated luster. But this is where Terminus shines. It was evident inside of the teasers that this map was going to bring a lot to the table in terms of the aesthetic design. All elements that bring the island to life with its dark and moody atmosphere and peculiar interconnected subsections. A dank and grimy prison facility located on this mysterious island with tropical foliage, mine shafts, and a huge laboratory located underneath. Smaller islands surround the main play space, all with their own landscapes, sandbars, and rock formations. It truly is spectacular. And the interconnectivity between all of the major landmarks is remarkable, as you can travel by boat nearly anywhere and use the map's cave system to head back into the prison, navigating the cool blue ocean while Patient 13's clouds chase you from behind. But what's even more magnificent is how Terminus feels so alive, haunted almost by the mad scientists, prisoners, and evil experiments that took place, driving nearly all of its occupants mad. As the player navigates the map in the early rounds, there are guards that are being eaten alive by zombies. Guards will also have a chance to kill the zombies, and if they survive, they will begin to attack the player. And if they are killed by a zombie or by us, we are able to pick up their weapons and use them for our own means in case we run out of ammo. Computers are still logged into, weather maps are still relaying information about the storm, and mess halls are still littered with scraps of food from the previous people who were here only moments prior. But what's most interesting about the map's lively structure is how there are zombies locked in isolation tanks, prison cells, body bags, gurneys, and they're even propped up sitting out on the smaller islands. These zombies will come alive and try to attack you, whether it's breaking the glass of the isolation tank or trying to push through the jail cell bars. There is a sense of death around every corner that we have never experienced in Zombies maps prior. Even opening up and using the Pack-a-Punch adds an element of emergency that makes me feel nervous when I hear the alarm sounding as the lift pulls up out of the water. However, I think the most extreme sense of urgency comes from the tentacle monster that lives beneath the water, also known as Patient Patient 13. While there's more to Patient 13's story, the overarching purpose of this monster serves as not only a threat to the player, but also as a gameplay mechanic for players to not hide out in the water for too long to cheat death. Patient 13 will burst out of the water spewing a Nova 5-like gas that follows you around until you're finally knocking at death's door. The only real negative aspect to this treacherous island that I find problematic is its lack of density. And if you look at previous Zombies experiences such as Ascension, Der Eisendrache, Blood of the Dead, etc., there was always a level of intense density with clutter and debris everywhere. This added to that claustrophobic nature that some Zombies maps adhere to, but with Terminus, it's not really like that. This map is very open, which we will touch on in just a bit, but it's also quite barren and almost clean. The walls are somewhat empty, rooms are partially organized, and spaces are vast and linear, which can make it feel less intimidating at times. I'm sure there are reasons for this. Perhaps it has to do with the zombie spawn system, perhaps it's just an artistic design choice, or maybe it's for a reason that I can't even fathom as a non-developer. But despite those particular shortcomings, Terminus still has the type of atmosphere that makes it feel like when your console or PC is shut down, the island still exists, as if its rain is still falling down even when you're not there. And I don't think there is one map in the entire catalog of Zombies experiences that has ever felt as real as this island does. But this begs the question, how did we get here? At the end of Black Ops Cold War Zombies, we see our main crew, who were former Requiem operatives, arrested by Edward Richtofen, who turned out to be the director of the entire operation, Project Janus. Richtofen had used Requiem as pawns in his scheme, which ultimately made Samantha Maxis sacrifice herself to the Forsaken and imprison the remaining. However, Richtofen has a specific hatred towards Weaver as he killed Richtofen's family accidentally in a fire. After the events of Forsaken, we also see Dr. William Peck, who was working with the Omega Group against Requiem, looking for something out in the Philippine Sea, which turned out to be Terminus. And while Terminus just seems like any other old prison, there's actually a lot more to it. You see, Richtofen specifically assigned Dr. Revati Modi to lead this facility so that they could weaponize Ethereum to further their agenda while also performing radical human experiments. Terminus functioned as a black site as it wasn't located on any map and essentially existed in pure darkness. So the fact that Requiem was sent here was not only unjust but purely barbaric, which is why there is such animosity towards Richtofen from our crew. As the years had passed, our former Requiem members had lost all hope until finally Dr. Peck and a new character named Maya Anguinaldo snuck into this facility to break these characters out. And of course, as you would expect, while this is all occurring, a new zombie outbreak begins, essentially undoing all of the work that Requiem had accomplished nearly half a decade prior. The details behind Terminus are rather intriguing, and similar to the map's atmosphere, the narrative also takes a life of its own. As the player begins to experience certain quests, Easter eggs, and general gameplay, they'll begin to uncover all sorts of interesting anecdotes from how the island was birthed into existence, the frustration of certain colleagues, and the amazing discoveries of other scientists. Most of this information can be found inside of the intel and through some in-game dialogue, but after 5 years of no set characters, how does our new crew fare inside of Terminus? Well, unfortunately, I'd have to say that they're just okay. Now, inside of the Dark Ether storyline, we are playing as Gregory Weaver, Dr. Gray, Matt Carver, and Maya Anguinaldo. But there are a few other characters tagging along, adding a bit more nuance and variety in the story. Weaver is the leader of the group, and he, Gray, and Carver are all hell-bent on finding Richtofen to confront him for locking them inside of Terminus. Maya has come to the island in search for her brother, who was also held captive on the island, and Peck is searching for his warheads, which were sent into the sea during the first Outbreak quest after the Legion boss fight. And now, during the main quest and gameplay, stories begin to blossom, intertwine, and develop as you'd expect, but outside of the larger narrative itself, which is proving to be quite interesting, the characters themselves are just not that compelling, at least not yet. And I think it's quite obvious that no matter what Treyarch did when it came to creating a cast of lovable characters, none of them will ever live up to the excitement of the original crew, and that's just fine. Weaver, Peck, and Strauss seem to have the most interesting personalities as of now, as Weaver is hellbent on revenge towards Richtofen, Peck is a crazed and mad scientist who is cocky and arrogant, and Strauss, who was once a more cautious and reserved man, has changed quite a bit as prison has broken his spirit, turning him into a resentful, bitter old man. Dr. Gray doesn't seem to have too much depth to her at this point in time, her dialogue fell rather flat for me, and Maya seems to just be a smartass for the sake of having some of that classic action hero sarcasm injected into the mix. But call me crazy, I just don't really feel that much of a difference between having operators in the map versus having this set crew in the map, especially when it seems like most of the lines in the game are homogenized between characters, removing any element of distinction between their personalities. It might seem like a silly thing, but having a dynamic yet distinct cast of characters can really make a map and larger narrative pop in ways that fans didn't see coming. One of the things that was so much fun about Ultimus, Primus, and even the Chaos crew was how unique each one of the characters felt in comparison to one another. There was always such a wide breadth of emotion, from being quite reserved and serious to over-the-top hilarious.
We'll be destroyed by the might of 1,000 thunderclaps.
Don't feel much stronger. Mind you, I can already run 10 miles with a full kit.
Filthy. Positively filthy! I told you I'd be back! If I didn't, I should have.
Whoa! Angry elephant! At least I'm not the only one who recognizes that this is fucking mental.
I'm making a list in my head of people to use this on. Richtofen. I could do this all day. I got plenty of corpses.
Ultimately, Treyarch has done so many things right with this new iteration of Black Ops 6 Zombies that it would be unfair to doubt them so soon into this new journey they're taking fans on. The job of Terminus is to tie up previous narrative threads and build up towards many new ones, and it does that well, as the momentum and intrigue is most certainly on Treyarch's side here. And while it's certainly enjoyable to have a mix between the radio call-in with Peck, Strauss, and Raptor 1, as well as the general crew voice lines, I am simply hoping for that extra flair that makes each character special. It would be great to see each map down the DLC pipeline, exploring each of our crew members a little bit more so that we have a chance to understand them better, as well as turn up those wild and spontaneous one-liners during the core gameplay loop, but especially during the main quest.
Heck! You're an idiot! And these stunts of yours are less than idiots!
We're like cooking up a wiretap. A really big wiretap.
We're gonna kill everyone responsible for what they did to me.
The history of Easter eggs inside of Call of Duty Zombies is a complicated one, and as of late, the Zombies community has been at odds with one another with what it means to have a proper main quest. Some fans think that it should be super difficult and obscure, while others think quests should be casual friendly so that anyone can hop in and experience it. Personally, I tend to think that main quest should be on the more challenging side, but shouldn't be difficult just to piss off the player. Logical steps and interesting puzzles are always going to be the way to go, but most importantly, there needs to be a flow to the quest that ramps up subtly to the climax of that particular experience. A Zombies map generally starts off simple and gradually increases in difficulty with both gameplay and the Easter egg, leading to moments of struggle that are followed by a brief moment of levity. And what makes COD Zombies special is that these moments where the player can breathe for a bit are still somewhat challenging due to the gameplay and the round that the player finds themselves on. If I was to visually represent it using a graph, it would look something like this. Now, Terminus is probably the closest we will ever get to appeasing both the casual and hardcore zombie fans simultaneously, and anyone who states otherwise would be disingenuous, since the quest most certainly ebbs and flows towards each section of the fanbase throughout the duration of the playthrough. And if we are to use this amazing scientific graph to represent Terminus's main quest, it would look something more akin to this. So the main issue then isn't which group is getting catered to and when, but more so how the pieces fit together when attempting to create this interactable experience for the player. This main quest has steps that feel quite jarring compared to one another, which naturally leads to these peaks and valleys that make the overall quest feel inconsistent. So what do I mean by that? Well, in previous titles, main quests would lead the player towards the first puzzle or challenge while also slowly increasing the difficulty. This would be followed by a moment of relief so that players could catch their breath, get more ammo, kill zombies for more points, all while pushing through the rounds, which then passively increases the difficulty. Then the next puzzle or challenge would be harder than the previous instance, followed again by a moment to relax and plan your next move, but this would also be more difficult than before as the rounds were ticking up as you were playing. This process rinses and repeats, leading to greater difficulty until the final boss fight or climactic moment of the map's Easter egg. However, when it comes to Terminus, it doesn't quite work this way. This Easter egg starts off just like any other, where turning on the power and opening up Pack-a-Punch gives you full access to the map in a majority, if not all, of the gameplay features. So far, so good. Then comes the first real exciting aspect of the map, which is building the wonder weapon, the Beamsmasher. And it's nothing too complicated, simply turning on a few computers, grab a multiphasic resonator, solve a simple math problem or pay Peck, and you're off to charge the resonator with various elements located around the map. And this next step is actually a little tough. The player needs to set down the multiphasic resonator at 3 various elemental orbs located on the smaller islands around Terminus and kill an elementally charged zombie near the resonator to collect its essence. It's a straightforward process, but since this takes place on earlier rounds and the player can run out of ammo, points, and armor, not to mention likely doesn't have a ton of perks, with all of these zombies spawning in, things can get a little chaotic, which then can cause mistakes to be made. This is a nice and gentle ramp up towards a challenging quest, but once the Beamsmasher is built, the next few moments crater in the opposite direction towards simplicity. Peck and Strauss literally spell out to the player over comms that they need a hard drive, which the Beamsmasher helps reveal by shooting the tentacle trap. This is followed by highlighting Nathan, Maya's brother's location, and then we're required to find a set of numbers around the map that can unlock him from the center chamber in the lab. While there are some pretty artistic and creative aspects to these steps, particularly with the hard drive being inside the tentacle traps, the challenge is simply not there, as the characters tell you exactly what you need and the numbers for the combination are laid out in the open. There is no resistance at all for building up to the next moment, which is the map's first narrative spectacle, revealing that Nathan has become compromised as he is transformed into an amalgam. This mini boss fight is great, and I love when Treyarch introduces set-piece moments like this. The music changes, the map's power cuts off, the doors lock, the pack-a-punch ramp makes its way down to the lab with the alarm blaring, all while Nathan is trying to kill you. And the balancing of this boss fight is almost perfect. Nathan is a bit of a bullet sponge, and the zombies chasing you are fast and numerous, but it's a really fun and intense moment that I'm sure Zombies fans will remember for years to come. This is then followed by a mid-quest in-game cutscene. Maya puts her brother down with a bullet to the head, where all of a sudden Dr. Revity Modi reveals herself on an overhead monitor, taunting our crew. Weaver and Peck decide to pursue her for both revenge and to get back Peck's warheads after figuring out how to activate the island's synaptic algorithm module system, aka SAM. And again, the characters on the comm spell things out for the player by telling us to go to a computer in a specific room on the island, followed by the cheesiest hint ever displayed in COD Zombies.
The network cables could be manually reconnected, in theory. Yeah, maybe they'll get lucky and find some node connectors.
Just like the hard drive and code gathering step, this next set of challenges is just as disengaging, which undoes any and all tension that was built up moments prior. All the player has to do is press interact on a computer, dive in the water to pick up a keycard, and survive a lockdown where the connector nodes are located. While in principle the lockdown sequence is interesting, it's really more of a perceived threat than anything else. Similar to the mini boss fight against Nathan, Treyarch uses sound and lighting to create intimidation inside of this tight space, which gives the illusion of claustrophobia. But if you take all that away, the holdout really isn't that difficult. Zombies die fairly quickly, and the threat against the player's life is not at all imminent, leading again to this ping-pong effect between easy and challenging quest steps. Once the connector nodes are collected and connected, Sam will activate and reveal that it has been programmed using Samantha Maxis as a blueprint and knows information about Richtofen's whereabouts. Sam provides us with a device that hacks buoys out in the bay in order to both override Dr. Modi's submarine controls so we can bring her back to the island. And this is a great step as the player makes their way out to the water to hack these buoys under threat of a timer counting down, parasites are spitting at you, and Patient 13 is hiding in the water. Once complete, Dr. Modi activates a self-destruct sequence that is designed to destroy the entire island. From there, the player needs to deactivate 3 bombs located in the lab, which is also timed, but this is much more threatening because if we fail here, the match ends. This gives a true sense of urgency and attempts to build strategy in order to survive. After the bombs are defused, Sam pulls Dr. Modi into the docks where the player can then begin the ending boss fight. Our crew makes their way outside to confront Dr. Modi, and while she is lambasting them for being idiots, Patient 13 comes from beneath her and swallows her submarine whole along with Peck's damn warheads. The Ethereum mixes with the beast, making him even more insane as he reveals himself to be a giant monstrosity with tentacles abound. I can't stress enough how important this final encounter was for Treyarch to get right, as over the last 5 years or so, the consistency of difficulty in their maps and their boss fights have been all over the place. And seeing such a spectacle, this giant mutated disgusting kraken, is something that any passionate Zombies fan should experience. Each sequence of this boss fight was carefully planned and crafted with such care. It's challenging, fair, and makes great use of the game's mechanics. It even handles amalgams and manglers well by not overspawning them, creating a near perfect boss fight experience that has the player on their toes the entire time. It would be wrong for me me to say that Terminus's main quest is bad or anything along those lines, because that simply isn't true. It merely suffers from some pacing issues that cause a stark shift in difficulty from moment to moment. Going from challenging sequences to overly simple moments where the player can completely coast through makes the quest not only feel inconsistent, but removes an aspect of leveling up throughout this quest. A great example of proper Easter egg progression would be something like Ancient Evil from Black Ops 4 Zombies, where puzzles start off simple and then become gradually more challenging as the player becomes more powerful in tandem. There are proper moments to take a breath, but you're on a steady track of leveling up towards something greater, and that momentum doesn't slow down at all. In future maps, I would love to see less of the hand-holding when it comes to the crew telling the player how to complete the steps so bluntly, along with creating a much more exponential track of difficulty that corresponds with the puzzle starting off simple and getting harder as the game moves forward. It would also be nice to have a few more steps to complete, as Terminus's main quest felt rather short, especially if you remove the building of the Beamsmasher. That being said, I think this could impede the purpose of the Easter egg reward structure of Black Ops 6 Zombies, but that's a topic for another video. Treyarch is just going to have to keep experimenting with this new quest style that they're going for to find the perfect balance, and while Terminus is a great step in the right direction, particularly with its boss fight, the quest itself is just not quite there. While the gameplay on Black Ops 6 is largely positive, that doesn't always mean a zombies map can handle those gameplay features appropriately, but that is not the case for Terminus. Jumping into the map and killing zombies feels great across the board. The toolkits at the player's disposal are amazing, and there is so much to do and interact with, especially when it comes to side Easter eggs and weird alternative activities. Before we talk about side quests, I'd quickly like to circle back to the fact that Terminus feels so alive. Yes, in terms of narrative, this island feels like a genuine black site that the government would hide from civilians, but this also is reflected in the gameplay itself. The traps are tentacle monsters that live inside of the ventilation system. The amalgams are these gross mutants with regenerating arms, legs, and heads. They're absolutely disgusting. Manglers are present as well, which is a little bit of a negative as they have been completely overused inside of COD Zombies over the last 8 years, but it's a reflection of the dark ether spilling into the world, which adds a bit of intensity of surviving on this gloomy rock in the middle of the sea. But what I really love, and it's a small detail, is the amount of zombie models that Treyarch created for Terminus. This adds to the lore of the map by reminding the player of how disturbed Dr. Modi and Richthofen are by conducting these human experiments and casting bodies aside like trash when they are done with them. Now we are slaughtering these undead creatures as the dark ether continues its affront. However, Terminus's experiments go even further by having zombies turning into vermin and parasites, which are great additions to the enemy variety. Now, I'm not sure if you have caught on yet, but there are a lot of enemies inside of Terminus, and while on paper that variety can be a good thing, if it's left uncontrolled, it can actually become a bit of a detriment, as constant spawning in of light and heavy armored zombies contribute to hordes becoming more damage dense as rounds progress, and the boss zombies and pest zombies spawn in at ridiculous rates, which makes the player burn through ammo as weapons are just not strong enough to handle the sheer volume of zombies and variety inside of the map. This leads to problems with high rounds as the score streak meta becomes the primary method for getting up to round 100, which can make getting to high rounds feel a bit wanting. But now let's talk about side quests. Over the last few months, Treyarch has been hinting to fans, actually not even hinting, straight up telling fans and content creators that Terminus had more side Easter eggs than any other map in Zombies history. And I think that this was an understatement. There are roughly 15-ish different side quests, depending on how you count them, that the player can activate, and let me just say that they're all worthwhile. From tiny minuscule things like picking up an oxygen tank underneath from the Pack-a-Punch platform, to shooting a UFO out of the sky that rewards you with tons of loot, to racing speedboats. There is just so much to do, and everything rewards the player with either perks or the wonder weapon, a ray gun, dark ether crystals, dark ether wrenches, and even points. But the best quest on the entire map has to go to the Captain's Treasure Hunt. This side Easter egg is a perfect example as to why Zombies is just so damn special. Not only does it reward the player with a talisman that grants permanent double points, but it adds to the lore of the map itself. Between the main narrative, the backstory told with intel, this side quest adds a whole new fun layer and twist to things. Amazing work, Treyarch. Please keep doing stuff like this. I promise you that the community appreciates it. There are also so many spaces and places to kill zombies. The prison yard, and all of the surrounding buildings, the lab, the mine shaft, the caves, the numerous islands around Terminus, and of course, the sinking ship. Each of these spaces provides a unique gameplay experience that that not only caters to the new zombie spawn system, but also suits the new omni-movement system. Mantling, diving, and sliding movement methods have been carefully crafted and considered when building the layout of this map. A perfect example of this is between the lab inside of Terminus versus the lab inside of D-Machine. D-Machine kind of used the old generation map design, as mantling was a new addition to zombies at that point in time. If you hopped over a railing in D-Machine, it would completely disrupt the horde and essentially allowed players to quickly reset if things were gone awry. But now in Terminus, the design language takes into consideration this fast gameplay by adjusting spawn systems and the level layout. Hopping over a railing in the lab on Terminus might get you out of a sticky situation temporarily, but a couple of zombies are going to be right behind you, not to mention the player won't be mantling into a wide open space necessarily, but onto another staircase or walkway, which makes your attempt at retreating much more dangerous. Main play spaces are now wide open, which allows for sliding and diving, but don't be mistaken, as the zombie spawn system accounts for this, and if you're not careful, you will get swallowed up by the horde. All of these small nuances start to add up, which makes regular matches fun and intense, but really impacts the high round games in new and challenging ways. Most Call of Duty Zombies games' high round strategy is always surrounding some sort of meta combined with a lot of time and patience, and Black Ops 6 Zombies is no different. And while that meta is primarily designed for super high rounds using score streaks and camping somewhere for fast spawns, those methods can become boring and tedious, which is why Terminus is wonderful for having a ton of different areas to kill zombies in so that you can complete high rounds your way. The player is free to go island hopping, can use traps or score streaks, but can also use the Beamsmasher.
Don't make me do it again. No! Don't mean it did that!
The Beamsmasher is a fantastic wonder weapon. It might not be a one-shot kill like the Apothecant Servant from Black Ops 3, but it has a very unique purpose and a bit of a learning curve as well. The way the wonder weapon works is by shooting a mesmerizing pulse which weakens enemies, allowing the player to then shoot the beam and destroy an entire horde in seconds. The weapon also encourages the player to empty the entire magazine so that an energy burst releases, knocking all the enemies backward, which works wonderfully when you have used the entire pulse shot in tandem to lower their health and armor. And lastly, you can use the Beamsmasher with other weapons by weakening enemies and then shooting them with bullet guns or the classic Mustang and Sally. It makes for a great high round strategy in between using score streaks. But while this wonder weapon is definitely high on my list in terms of enjoyment, it would be even better if it could contain more ammunition. Yes, it's perfectly viable for high rounds, but once the player gets up to the upper echelon of difficulty, there are so many zombies spawning in on the map that ammo disappears quicker than you can replenish it. But other than that, it truly is a great addition to the arsenal that is the COD Zombies Wonder Weapon catalog. Terminus is a fantastic reintroduction into this new era of Call of Duty Zombies. It takes many of the issues players had with previous maps from the last few franchise installments and shows fans that the developers are taking round-based zombies seriously. The main quest wraps up a ton of loose ends from Cold War zombies and introduces new paths to explore narratively by rewarding fans with an amazing ending cutscene. And now that the Chaos story has been canonically injected into the Dark Ether timeline, which I don't think anyone saw coming at all, this hopefully means that no location is off limits with the reintroduction of fantasy elements into this larger Dark Ether narrative. This puts Black Ops 6 Zombies and Treyarch's potential map design in an extremely advantageous position. Just look at the information surrounding DLC 1. But overall, is Terminus a perfect map? No, it's not, and Treyarch certainly has room to improve, especially when it comes to the quest design, crew dialogue, and gameplay narrative interweaving. But a spark has been ignited in our crazy corner of the internet, and for the first time in a long while, fans are able to be excited again, as Treyarch not only exceeded the community's expectations, but are exuding confidence with how they are going to execute their vision for the future of Black Ops 6 Zombies.